So you sent over some wild stuff for this deep dive, and honestly, the story about the state dinner in Panama with like naked people and switch name cards and someone running from horses, it's almost too much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But it's the perfect place to start because it sets the tone for everything we're going to talk about. Our main source today is Sarah Wynne Williams's book, Careless People,
Okay.
and this crazy dinner. It was just the beginning of her time at Facebook, way back when it was just getting started.
Interesting.
You were curious about what it's like inside these tech giants, especially as they start to, have all this power around the world, right?
Right.
This book gives us a peek behind the curtain at Facebook as they were figuring out like international relations and policy, all that stuff back in the day. And your sources mentioned the incredible pressure and just bizarre situations that would come up where technology meets global politics. We're absolutely going to dive into those "you gotta be kidding me" moments.
Sounds good.
Like the clash between the original idealistic vision and the reality of, well, actually trying to do things globally. The crazy interactions with different governments, the unexpected challenges they faced, and how big names like Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg shaped it all.
Yeah, that opening story, the one about the dinner, it really throws you right into the deep end. It's such a clear example of how unpredictable things can be for a company that's growing super fast and navigating like uncharted territory.
Exactly. So let's go back to the author's early experiences. She comes from a background in international law, worked at the UN, was a diplomat for New Zealand, and she saw Facebook as this like huge potential force for good, for connecting people across borders and all that.
That initial idealism is really striking.
Especially coming from someone who understood international affairs so well.
Yeah.
She wasn't just looking for a job. She really believed Facebook could change the world, which, makes it even more interesting to see how things actually unfolded. Even getting a job at Facebook was an adventure for her.
Yeah.
She basically pitched them on creating a role like a Facebook diplomat, someone to navigate the complexities of the international political landscape.
Oh, wow.
But they weren't interested, at least not at first. They were so focused on the U.S. market back then that they didn't see the need for that kind of position.
Which really shows how inward-looking Facebook was in those early days.
Mhm.
When you're growing that fast, dealing with the immediate demands of your main market, it's easy to see how international stuff might take a back seat.
But she didn't give up. She eventually got a communications job in Australia, and even then, she kept bringing up this global policy role in every interview. It took a while, but she finally got to D.C., to their office there, and the culture there was wild, especially compared to the traditional government and diplomatic settings she was used to.
I can imagine.
Exposed pipes, fake graffiti, all in this fancy downtown building. It was still very much a startup, even though its influence was, exploding globally.
That clash between the rough, unfinished office and the formal D.C. scene is really telling. They were holding on to that Silicon Valley, we're not like the others vibe, even as they were dealing more and more with, the establishment.
For sure. Her early attempts to push a global perspective met with resistance. She proposed a global council, basically experts from around the world to advise them on political and strategic issues.
Okay.
Their response: we make the decisions, straight up. Very insular.
It reinforces that tech company mentality, like we know our users and our platform better than anyone, maybe underestimating how different things are in other parts of the world.
Totally. And then you have these stories that really show this culture clash. Like when the Prime Minister of New Zealand visited, you'd think they'd talk about policy, innovation, regulation, all that serious stuff.
Yeah.
Instead, the whole thing was about his Facebook page, his frustration with the 5,000 friend limit, and this crazy quest to find his friend Choppy for a helicopter tour. Talk about a disconnect between diplomatic expectations and Facebook's priorities at the time.
The Choppy story
Yeah.
is both hilarious and really telling. It's like they didn't quite grasp the importance of talking to a head of state beyond, just the features of their platform.
And it wasn't just New Zealand. A German delegation visited, saw think wrong, move fast, and break things on the walls, and were just floored. Like they couldn't wrap their heads around that seemingly chaotic environment.
That German reaction highlights a different way of doing things, maybe more traditional, definitely more risk-averse. The move fast and break things idea, so big in Silicon Valley, just didn't translate to a culture that values stability and established processes.
Right. Then you had Sheryl Sandberg, known for her intense work ethic, and that seemed to permeate the whole company. The book talks about this idea that the answer to work is more work, like keeping everyone so busy they wouldn't have time for internal conflicts or power struggles. It sounds super demanding, all-consuming even.
That constant work mentality is common in startups, but it can lead to burnout, and it can stifle different perspectives, if people don't have time to think and engage outside of work.
As Facebook started expanding globally, these cultural differences became even more obvious and new challenges popped up. The author mentions a summit in Cartagena and this mysterious Yavi guy, super influential at Facebook, but like a ghost publicly, hints at these hidden power structures within the company.
Yeah, it's like the public face of Facebook's leadership might not have been the whole story.
Right. And then her trip to Myanmar to get Facebook unblocked. Honestly, it's surreal. This massive empty highway, a dimly lit feudal court, a tense encounter with a video crew. It sounds like another planet.
Wow.
And the realization that Myanmar was going online mainly through mobile phones, skipping the desktop phase entirely. That was a huge insight.
That Myanmar trip shows how crucial it is to understand the specific tech landscape in each region. A strategy that works in one place might be totally irrelevant in another.
Yeah.
They needed to grasp that mobile-first thing in Myanmar fast.
And then meeting Aung San Suu Kyi, politely chatting about New Zealand accents and Facebook, all while the country was going through this massive internet shift. It shows how delicate these high-level meetings can be.
It's a reminder that these aren't just about policies and specs. They're about personal dynamics, communication styles, and the specific political situation in each place.
Totally. And through all this, the author's initial optimism started to clash with Facebook's growth at all costs mentality. The product seemed to be about connection, which is a good thing, but the driving force was getting more users, maybe without fully thinking about the consequences.
Yeah, that tension between a positive mission and an aggressive growth strategy is a big one. Can that kind of expansion really go hand in hand with being a responsible global citizen?
Then there's Korea and the cybercrime branch. They considered sending the author, they literally called her the body, to see if the Korean authorities would arrest someone from Facebook HQ.
Hold on, what?
The fact that they didn't seem to care about her safety in that situation is really telling.
That's shocking. It shows how focusing on company goals can sometimes totally overshadow the well-being of individual people. It doesn't exactly fit the image of a caring company.
Not at all. And this brings us to the ethical dilemmas. The Internet.org initiative, which was supposed to give free access to certain online services in developing countries, stalled. Mark Zuckerberg was on a panel with President Obama in Panama and then suddenly wasn't. Navigating those political events was clearly complicated.
The Internet.org thing shows the challenges of bringing tech to the world. What seems like a good idea, bridging the digital divide, gets tangled up in net neutrality, data privacy, and potentially creating information bubbles.
Right. Then there's a meeting with Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil, who knew a lot about internet regulation.
Oh.
It was clear that not every leader was going to just accept Facebook's vision without thinking about their own country's interests.
It shows that leaders were becoming more aware of how powerful these platforms are and wanting to shape the digital landscape in their own countries.
The author started to feel really uneasy about Internet.org, a war room for India, but not Brazil, using questionable tactics to create the appearance of public support.
Like what?
Free t-shirts, manipulative messaging about free basics. It felt like they were pushing ethical boundaries to get more users.
It seems like they were prioritizing good PR and growth over genuine community engagement and transparency. Creating the idea of support is very different from actually having it, and it can damage trust in the long run.
And those 17 million identical comments supporting free basics. They didn't sway the regulators in India at all. In fact, it seemed to backfire.
That outcome shows that regulators are looking for more than just numbers. Identical submissions usually lack real arguments, which emphasizes the importance of actual engagement and understanding local regulations.
Then there's China, agreeing to store data in China under their terms, something they refused to do for other countries. Developing censorship tools, facial recognition, photo tagging.
Wow.
And not being totally honest with Congress about working with the Chinese Communist Party. It raises big questions about balancing global expansion with, basic principles.
Their approach to China highlights the difficult decisions companies face when working in countries with different rules and values. Agreeing to store data differently and create censorship tools shows how complex navigating those political systems can be.
Blocking Guo Wenghui's page to appease the Chinese government shows how political considerations can directly affect content moderation, potentially silencing people.
That's a key example of how political pressure can impact free speech online.
And launching two unauthorized apps in China. It felt like they were so desperate to get into that market that they were willing to operate outside the rules.
It shows how badly they wanted access to the Chinese market and the risks they were willing to take for it.
Then you have the emotional targeting thing in Australia, showing ads to people based on their emotions, which they figured out from their online activity. Targeting ads to people who seemed insecure, for example.
Hold on.
There was a big internal debate about how to talk about this publicly. Advertising people saw it as a powerful tool, but the policy team was worried about how it would look. It highlights a huge tension within the company.
That's a perfect example of the ethical issues that come with having so much user data. How do you use it responsibly, especially when dealing with sensitive things like emotions?
The author started to see more and more unease among Facebook employees about the company's role in the 2016 U.S. election and how leadership seemed to dismiss any criticism. Zuckerberg and Sandberg called it a witch hunt and scapegoating, which shut down any chance for internal reflection.
That dismissive response from the top is troubling. It suggests they weren't willing to truly acknowledge the impact of the platform, which can be demoralizing for employees who feel responsible.
Absolutely. Fact-checking partners like Snopes left, saying Facebook wasn't serious about fighting misinformation. It seemed like those partnerships were more about PR than actually fixing the problem.
The fact-checkers leaving shows how hard it is to address misinformation at scale. It implies a gap between what they said they do and what they actually did.
Then you have these disturbing stories, like the contractor who had a seizure in the office and was ignored. It suggests that the focus on work sometimes overshadowed basic human decency.
It's a stark reminder that productivity and company goals can sometimes come at the expense of basic human compassion.
The situation in Myanmar with the Rohingya people being targeted with hate speech on Facebook, it's maybe the biggest example of the real-world harm these challenges can cause.
Right.
A UN report directly linked Facebook to this tragedy.
The Myanmar crisis is a huge lesson for platforms like Facebook. When you connect billions of people, you have enormous responsibility. The spread of hate speech and the real-world consequences show how urgent it is to have effective content moderation and proactively address potential harm.
And Joel Kaplan's behavior, the sultry comment, the unwanted touching at a dinner, it shows a decline in the company culture and a lack of accountability.
Those kinds of incidents in leadership point to potential problems with workplace behavior and a failure to create a respectful and inclusive environment.
Even something like a WASP attack, and the author's reaction to it compared to her experiences at Facebook. She found the physical pain of the sting easier to deal with than the emotional stress of her job.
That comparison is powerful. It shows how deeply the ethical compromises and the work environment had affected her.
It eventually led her to scale back her efforts to push Facebook's agenda. Her own values didn't align with the company's direction anymore.
It's a reminder of how important it is to stay true to your values, especially when dealing with ethical challenges at work.
And the epilogue. Joel Kaplan kept rising within Meta, and the author continued working on tech policy and shareholder activism. It suggests that these problems and the fight for accountability in tech are far from over.
Yeah, the epilogue is a reminder that these early decisions have lasting effects and that the work to address ethical issues in tech is ongoing.
So in the end, that initial optimism about Facebook faced some serious obstacles as they gained power and influence around the world.
It's a fascinating look at a company grappling with its impact and the consequences of its choices.
Sarah Wynne Williams' experience gives us a glimpse into the internal struggles and the complex situation they were dealing with.
Hopefully, this deep dive into Sarah Wynne Williams' experience has given you a better understanding of the forces shaping the tech we use every day. It reveals a lot. The allure and danger of growth at all costs, the cultural clashes that happen when Silicon Valley meets the rest of the world, and how crucial a strong ethical compass is for these powerful tech companies.
After hearing all of this, what do you think is the biggest challenge for global tech companies as they navigate different political systems and cultures? And what role should individuals and governments play in shaping the future of these platforms? There's a lot to think about. If you want to dig deeper, the book is Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams.
I'll have to check it out.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. Until next time.
Thanks for having me.